Hi, and welcome back to the second part in our series on my Atari ST Mega, or is it Atari Mega? I don't know, I'm a little bit confused about the name. I keep on calling it ST Mega, but I don't think you actually need to say that, because I think the ST was a kind of computer with that in that range, right? I think that's right. Yeah, anyway. So this is the Mega. Well, I mean, it's not the entire Mega, it's just the shell. But that's the outer case of it. And the reason obviously why it's like this is because I currently have it in pieces on the desk over there waiting to have some work done on it. And that's what we're going to be doing in this episode. And what do we have planned? Well, when I received it, I actually bought it from a guy in Germany. I believe the STs were very popular over there. And it turns out that these machines in particular seem to be very common when you source them from Germany. At least when I looked on eBay, there were lots of different models of them available in Germany. Maybe that's just a transitory thing. Maybe over time that will change. But anyway, I found that if I really wanted one of these, I was going to have to get a German one. And the problem with that is the ST in general had pretty much all of its operating system on a ROM. And let me just put this down. That's obviously slightly different to the way, for instance, the Amiga works, where you have a large proportion of the operating system in a ROM, basically the sort of kernel, i.e. the core of the operating system, but the majority of it is then actually implemented in software. Now, in the early days of the Amiga, like the Amiga 1000, which I have over here, pretty much everything was done in software, actually. You had to load in quotes, the ROM from a floppy disk, the kickstart, and then if you wanted to then have the OS, you then had to then load in the workbench separately. But on the ST, they decided very early on to just go for a simple solution where the kernel and the operating system, the GUI, everything is basically in the ROM. And that does have some advantages. For instance, it boots up very, very quickly. But it does have some downsides as well. Now, when I received this machine, it had a German ROM in it, TOS, German TOS basically. And that meant that it's not particularly useful for me because I'm not a non-German speaker. Now, obviously, I could learn German, but it's probably easier for me to actually change the ROM in this machine to actually be in English, US English or British English, it doesn't really matter. I'll go for British English because why not? Now, the issue is it's actually not that easy to change the ROMs in one of these machines. It's actually a little bit tricky, and we'll go into that into this video. But that's one of the things that we'll be doing today. We'll be changing the ROMs so that we're not using the German TOS, but using the English one. And along the way, we'll do a small upgrade as well. This machine came with TOS, I think it was 1.02, and we'll be upgrading to the latest version that we can use for this particular generation of hardware, which is 1.04, as far as I understand it. And the whole sort of TOS ROM situation is actually pretty complex. And I'm not an ST person from back in the day, and I haven't used an ST before, so forgive me if I make any mistakes in this video, because it is actually quite a complicated situation that you have going on, because you have different ROM versions that only work in certain machines, and then you have modern replacements for TOS, which only work in certain machines, and the way you actually get the ROMs to work is a little bit complex. So yeah, it's a thing, believe me. I've done a lot of research, and I've asked for the help of the ST community, and they've helped me out to try and get to this point where actually I can do this. And believe me, it wasn't simple. It's a complicated little beast. So that's, like I said, what we'll be covering in this video. Also, I did manage to get this cable, which is a replacement for this cable here. Now, this cable does work, but it has a number of what I would describe as sort of cuts in it. It actually had, well, there we are, you can see that there, hopefully. The actual out of casing of the cable there has completely come away and fallen off. And it's like that along its entire length. Pretty much the entire cable is sort of like, it looks like it's been cut. It hasn't been cut. I think it's just the age of it. I think the plastic is just perishing and it's going to go. Obviously, once that's gone, this internal cable is going to be exposed to a lot of stress and it's probably going to break. So I'll keep this as a backup because I believe it still works. But now I've got this, which is a brand new replacement. Obviously, it's a lot shorter. Maybe with a bit of stretching, it'll get similar in length to this one, but it doesn't really have to be that long because all it has to do obviously is just have enough space from the keyboard to go into the computer. But it's quite an important cable because they made a decision with the Mega to actually plug the mouse into the keyboard. So if you don't have a keyboard, you don't have a mouse either. So yeah, a bit of a double bubble with that, to be honest. So there's that as well. Then we have the fan in the power supply. I've bought this, which is a 40mm Noctua fan. So we're going to replace the fan in the power supply as well. Not that necessary, I suppose, but it being a Noctua fan, it should reduce the sound on the machine when it's running, which is a good thing. And I'm not sure how hot it gets. I think it's a 68,000, so it's possible that I can get away with reducing the speed of the fan. I may do that in this video. I may give that a try and see how much of a difference it makes to the airflow. The airflow direction is to go out of the case, so I've got to remember that. And generally, when you have fans, the part of the fan that has the branding is usually the direction in which the airflow goes. And that's the way it is with Noctua. So I've got to make sure that I've got the Noctua brand facing outwards to make sure that the air gets sucked into the machine through the top vents and then go across the logic board and then get pulled out through the power supply. It's all one big open case. So the airflow in there isn't particularly wonderfully guided, but there is airflow. Air can actually get in through the vents. The vents on top of the machine are actually real. If you remember the last video, it's got quite a lot of slats on top and they act as the vents. So this should actually make a little bit of a difference. So I think that's enough for one video. So I think we should crack on with it. And I think the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to change the TOS ROM because I really, really want to get this machine, the operating system, to be in English. And as I said, there's no way of doing that without actually replacing the ROMs because you don't load the actual operating system off disk. It's, you know, even if I had a hard disk with this machine, it would still be in German, the operating system. So that's something we really have to do. So let's get on with it. Let's replace those ROMs. So let me explain what the problem is with the ROMs. I was talking about it in the intro and it's a bit convoluted and I was a little bit confused by it when I came to the Atari ST scene because it's not really something I've encountered before. I've mainly had exposure to the Amiga in the past and Commodore 64, etc., etc. So we have here two ROMs and these ROMs have a combined size of 192K, which is a relatively unusual size. You may be aware of that. Generally, EPROMs, for example, will be 32 kilobytes, 64 kilobytes, 128 kilobytes, 256. You see where I'm going? It's geometric progression, 512, 1 megabyte, so on and so forth. You can actually get 96 kilobyte EPROMs, which is what you'd need for each one of these. But as far as I'm aware, they don't exist anymore in this form factor, this number of pins. So you might be able to get an EPROM with 96K. I see them in square packages. I think I might have seen them where they have more pins, which overhang the socket. So yeah, that's not necessarily the best solution. Back in the day when these were made by Atari, they had these made to the right size, they're 96K each, and you plug them in and off you go. So we need to replace these. In other revisions of the board and some other time, Atari decided that they might want to use a different setup. So for instance, you can use 6 ROMs, each of which is 32K in size, which all add up to being 192K. So yeah, 3 32s is 96. Multiply that by 2, you get 192K. So therefore you can, if you wish, use 6 ROMs in this machine. And that's the way I'm going to go. I've actually got the EPROMs here. They're relatively cheap. They're not super cheap. But honestly, to get around this, to only use 2, I would have to use an adapter. And from what I recall, the adapter may not actually fit correctly once the power supply's in. The power supply's over here. And it costs money. It's quite expensive. So I think I'm going to go the sort of more basic route, the more sort of standard route, the way it would have been done back in the day. And I'm just going to solder in more sockets in these positions to give me 6 sockets, and then I can use these EPROMs. Like I said, this is a 32K EPROM, so I've got 6 of those, so they're ready to go. I've got the sockets here. There we are. I'm using the round pin sockets, which hold the chips in better. They do have the downside, though, of making it much harder to actually put chips in. So I've actually put chips into each one of these sockets already and then pulled them back out, which was a lot of fun. But I did that so that when it comes to the point where I have to put the chips back in, there should be a little bit more ease of insertion because I've actually pre-inserted these to try and get them sort of worn in a little bit. So these are the original ROMs, I should say. Let's take those out. I'm not actually just pulling these out. I've pre-pulled them off camera just to make it a bit easier. So what we have right now, obviously, is we have 2 original sockets. I am not going to pull those out. I'm just going to put the EPROMs into those. I don't see any benefit. They are double wipe. In other words, they have metal pads, metal contacts on either side of the pin, which means that these are decent quality sockets. They haven't failed up until now, so I don't see why they will fail in the future. So I'm just going to keep those in place. So I only need to actually install 4 sockets. The other thing I need as well is for each one of these is to have a capacitor, and you'll see that they already have capacitors in place here. So I don't know why Atari did that, because they're not actually used. And this one seems to have, what is that? Some kind of ferrite bead or something like that? I'm not quite sure. So I need to check this one, make sure this is correct. I believe it is. Otherwise, why did Atari solder it in? But these tantalum capacitors are already in position, so we should be good to go there. And then the other thing I need to show you down here is right now, this machine is obviously configured to use 2 ROMs. And Atari obviously had to have a way of changing between that configuration using 6 ROMs. So down here, there are a set of 3 jumpers, one of which is a kind of odd one, this one here. Do you see that? It looks like you can have something installed in this position. Well, this is actually jumper W4. It's not listed as a J. It should be, I suppose, because it is actually a jumper. But this needs to be connected from here to here for me to use 6 ROMs. So we're going to have to put either a wire between here and here, or an actual jumper. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an actual jumper with a bit of wire going over to here, so that I can basically pull a jumper off if I need to. If at any point in the future there is a need to actually go back to using 2 ROMs in this machine. Here you've obviously got 3 pins for a jumper, and you've got 3 pins for a jumper. And what Atari have actually done is they soldered a 0 ohm resistor in place, which is effectively a jumper between here and here. And I don't need that, or I will need to move that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unsolder these, and then I'm going to put a 3-pin jumper set in here. And then here I'm going to put in a 2-pin jumper set, because as I said, this is either open or closed, but this can be, as you can see, in 2 different positions. With those things done, I should be able to actually put in my EPROMs, and hopefully the machine will boot, fingers crossed. The other thing I'll need to show you is how you actually make those EPROMs, the images for them. And that's actually quite convoluted, so we'll be doing that in a while. But I think what I'll do is I'll make a start on getting this board set up and ready to go in terms of hardware. We need to get those sockets in, and we need to get these unsoldered. So obviously to do that, I'm going to have to flip the board over. So I'm not going to show you all of that process. And if I do, then we'll do it as a montage, so we can go through that a little bit quicker. But yeah, let's make a start by getting that done. But before we do that, let's have a quick word from our sponsor, PCBWay. PCBWay, where you can make your tech dreams a reality. PCBWay can also manufacture for you flex and rigid flex PCBs. These are boards where elements are fully flexible or parts are flexible and rigid. The choice is yours. Whether it's PCB prototyping, PCB assembly, 3D printing, or even CNC machining, PCBWay is the way. Starting with an instant quote for your PCB projects, PCBWay will leap into action, building your PCB, assembling it for you if you wish, and once it's passed their quality tests, it'll be winging its way to you in a flash. PCBWay, PCB prototyping the easy way. So I think the first thing we should do is get these sockets in for the ROMs, right? I've got 4 of them here. Got a little bit of blue tack there, ready to hold them down. I have to just pinch pieces off and then pin it down into place. Got to make sure that the notch is in this direction. It's indicated here on the board. Oh yeah, that one fell in quite easily. Some of these don't actually go in very easily, so I'll have to wriggle them around a bit. Oh yeah, that one was fine. This one, yep, that's good. Okay. So I fiddle around with these off camera, and obviously doing that has made the pins align a little bit better, because they were a little bit painful to get in. Okay, so let's put some blue tack in position for each one. I'm just going to try and put it in the middle away from the pins, because I don't want it to melt with the heat from the soldering. Preserve my blue tack for another day. There we are, let's pin that down. Here as well. Now, I'm not sure if one end is going to do the job, but fingers crossed it will. Is that tacking? Look, we're not really tacking enough. There we are. Let's just push it down a bit. There we are. What I don't want to happen is obviously when I turn the board over is they just fall off. Because this would be a waste of time, wouldn't it? Which would be not so good. So yeah, let's push this into position. There we are. And now for a blob in the middle, I think, for each one. There we go. Let's get that in there. I want to make sure it bridges both sides. Same here. And the last one here. Actually, I don't need that one, do I? Because that's just already soldered in. Cool. All right, well, that looks good. Let's try turning it over and seeing if it falls out. It shouldn't do. Yeah, seems to be all right. Okay, so let's put it there. Make sure you can see that nicely. Cool. And yeah, I can feel the pins. They're coming through. That's great. Okay, let's get the soldering iron on. We'll just give it a second for the soldering iron to heat up and then I'll be at it. I'm going to use this Weller solder. It's actually got flux in its core as far as I remember, so I'm not actually going to put any flux on these. I'm just going to rely on the flux, which is actually, as I said, in the core of this wire to help with the soldering. If I find it's not flowing properly, then I will actually obviously put flux on. But I just want to save on the flux that I use, which is Chip Quick, which is great stuff, but quite expensive. So let's see, here we go. Here, sorry if I'm obscuring the camera, but obviously the most important thing is I get this soldered in right. I don't know if you can see this, but as I'm presenting the solder to the iron, I can actually see the flux coming out of it. So it does seem to be working. It is actually going into the holes quite nicely. There we are. So the 4 are tacked in. What I need to do now is go through, actually this one isn't. Let's just do and this one here as well. Great. Okay, so they are tacked in. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to solder in the rest of the pins, and obviously we don't want to watch that in real time, so we're just going to fast forward through this. So yeah, join me on the other side. Quick wipe of the soldering iron just to get off any old solder oxidized with flux, and then we'll carry on. Okay, I think that's good. I'm going to get some tissue and clean that up with some IPA and my toothbrush. So let's do that next. There we go. There's actually not that much flux because I obviously didn't douse it with flux beforehand. So hopefully that will just spread it out a bit. And if this is tacky afterwards, I may actually come back again with a tissue to do another pass at it and dab that off if it is actually tacky. So I think that's looking okay. So let's just leave that to dry for a second. It's alcohol, so it shouldn't take long to evaporate, and then I'll just do another visual inspection. And from what I'm seeing, I can't see any mist. So I think I've done a pretty decent job of that. So yeah, let's just leave that to dry. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and unsolder those jumpers that I showed you earlier. And I've made some marks on the logic board just to help me. These two blobs here, that's one of the jumpers that I need to take out. And over here, you can see these set of 3 pads here. These are the other jumpers as well. So these will be replaced with a set of 3 jumpers. And over here, I'm going to try and somehow make this into a double, 2 jumper, which is basically on or off. And these two are options. So to do that, the first thing I'm going to do is actually put a little bit of new solder onto them, which is going to hopefully make it easier to suck out the solder when I do come to do that. And then what I'm also going to do is when I've got that on, I'm going to put a little bit of extra flux as well, because I want to make sure that these come out first time, ideally. Although, we'd be lucky if that happens, let's be honest. Okay, so first of all, new big blob of solder there. And I've reflowed that as well. And another one there. Now this one is just a pad, so we need to get like a nice big blob on there. There we are, that's pretty good. And over here, these 3, so the same thing again. I'm just making sure that it melts all the way through. This is trying to wake up, as it were, the solder to try and get it ready to be sucked out. There we are, so a big blob there. That's just an empty via there. And then over here, there's already quite a big blob. So I'm just going to put a bigger one. There we are. That's good. So that's got the new and the old solder to make friends, hopefully. Same thing here. There we are. Okay, so that's done. So I can turn off the soldering iron, put it back in its holder, just make sure it's safe. And next we need to put a little bit of flux on these. As I said, that should hopefully then aid it in flowing out. So, and there's the other. So fingers crossed, it'll come out straight away without any hassle, and I won't have to use solder wick to try and get that out. I do have some solder wick ready just in case that doesn't quite work as planned, so fingers crossed. So the next thing we need to do is turn on the desoldering gun. Just wait for that to get up to temperature. It's nowhere as fast as my soldering iron, and yeah, it's obviously a cheaper unit. It does the job, but it does take quite a while. The soldering iron will get up to temperature in about 4 or 5 seconds, and the gun takes about probably like a minute or something like that. So yeah, we'll just skip ahead to when that's actually nice and warm and ready to go. It's up to 3, 6, 7. I know it's kind of slowed down a bit, so that's pretty much in the ballpark. Okay, fingers crossed, here we go. And obviously put it on, let it start melting, and then suck out. I can see the pin. Next one. There we are. Melt, melt, melt. That was better, a lot better, that one. Now this one. Great, that emptied that. Down it goes, suck. Not bad. Pretty good. Excellent, that's open. This one. Open, that's good. Open, open, open. Pretty good, pretty good. Not so good at the end, but hopefully with a little bit of persuasion, that will come out. Okay, so we can turn off the soldering sucker, put it back in its holster, let it cool down. Okay, let's turn on the soldering iron again. And what I'm going to try and do is just try and get, by holding the resistor well, the 0 ohm resistor on the other side. I'm going to try and get this to come out. It's quite hard to grip, actually. I feel it's already loose. Maybe if I wriggle it a bit. Actually, there we are. It's dropped out. Excellent. That's dropped out. Hope you can see that there. There we go. Well, that's fallen out. Let's put that over there. I need to recycle that because that is a perfectly reusable 0 ohm resistor. What about this one here? Yeah, same thing. Just break resistance of the remaining solder, just rotate it a bit, and out it comes. There we go. Let's just go over this a little bit. That's it. Okay, tiny bit of alcohol, and then I think we're okay to go around the other side and see what we have. Let's give it a quick clean. Good. Let's go around the other side and we'll put the jumpers in and we'll try and manufacture something that will make this work a little bit better. So we've gone back around the other side and I have taken a piece of header strip here and I've clipped off 2 sets of 3, 1 set of 2, and we're going to install those now. So first of all, I'm going to do the most difficult one, which is the set of 2. And what I've done with that is I've taken a piece of leg from, I think it was a capacitor, a bit of cut off leg. And you can see I've soldered it on there, if I can get that in focus for you. And there's like a 90-degree angle there, and that's going to go over to the other hole over here. So this one pin is going to go through here, the pin of the actual header itself, which you see I've kind of pushed down a little bit just to make it a little bit deeper than normal. And then the leg of the capacitor is going to go over to the other hole. It's a little bit of a bodge job. I think the header will fit on, although I'm going to have to probably turn it upside down so that the metal hits these 2 pins immediately rather than, you know, it kind of slides on a bit. But I think it's about the neatest thing I can manage, really. If you got any better ideas, please write in the comments and let me know how you would have done it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of flux in the hole and I'm going to actually solder it from above first, which is not that normal, but one of the pins is quite small, so I just want to make sure that it actually does make contact with the hole. And to do that, like as I said, I'm going to do it backwards and I'm going to do it from the top just to make sure that it is actually in. And then we'll finish it off by putting some extra solder on the bottom, but the majority of the work needs to be done by the top in this case. So let's see if I can fit that in. There we are, that's in there. Can we get that in there? There we are, it's fitting in both. Sitting obviously quite high because it's got a piece of solder underneath there, which you can't really get past. That's the only way I could do it, really. So the soldering iron is on. So let's try and tack this in from above. It's going to be a bit awkward, but we should be able to get something going. So there we go. There we are. That's done there. And now this one here. Excellent. That's in there. There's a little bit of blob that's gone on here, isn't it? Let's try and get that off just to make it look a bit neater. That's all. There we are. There we are. That looks better. It's relatively robust. Good. Now, for the other headers, we're going to put a little bit of blue tack because when I'm going to turn the board over, I'm pretty sure these will fall out. So let's just make sure that's in. And this one here as well. And yeah, I'm going to have to flip the board over before we can solder these in. And for each one of these, I'm just going to put a little blob of blue tack on them just to make sure that they don't fall out. So let's put one on here. Just wedge it in there. There we go. And the same with this one. Wedged in. Yeah, it's pretty good. Okay, let's flip it over and then we'll solder the underside. Here we are on the other side, and this is what we just soldered in, and you can see there's the pin sticking through there. I need to trim that, and there you can see the solder's flowed through and filled the hole, so that's actually pretty good. So let's just do the headers, these sets of 3s over here. So nice and gentle so we don't disrupt them. There we go. Obviously, these have to be pretty robust because they are headers and you put some physical stress on them when you put the headers in. So let me just put a bit of extra solder there and then a bit more here. It's pretty good. Nice. I'm holding it about against the pin to make sure that the pin gets nice and hot so that then the solder walks down the pin as I introduce the solder to it. There we go. And I need to trim off that one there. So let me just get my snippers and hold the pin from above so it doesn't pop off. So there we are. Get that out of the way. Pretty good. So let's just turn off the soldering iron because we don't need that anymore. Tiny bit of alcohol and we'll just scrub up this area just to see what we can see, just so it's a bit easier to see. Clean off any burning from the... Sometimes the flux burns as you solder. It goes a bit dark and it can make it look a little bit, I don't know, tiny bit janky, but there's no real problem. It's just the flux, as I said, burning a little bit. Maybe some dust or something in there as well. So now it looks nice and clean. Cool, that's looking pretty good, isn't it? Let's flip it over and see what we have. And we can take off the blue tack as well. Okay, we are, I think, pretty much done. A little bit of flux has come through the hole there and there as well. So let's just take off the blue tack. Don't need it on there anymore. We don't need it on these sockets either. These should be good. Looking good. Okay, I think we are good. Let's put these jumpers in place. I'm not going to put them in the final position. We'll do that a bit later. We'll check the diagnostic. Actually, let me just put a little bit of alcohol on there because that is very gummy looking. And I can just brush around it a bit just to get rid of that flux which has come through the hole from the other side. Let me get my brush. Just clean up a little bit. Great. Okay, that's probably got rid of some of the residue. Okay. Let's put these in position. And as I said, we'll come back later. And obviously we need to let this dry, the alcohol dry. So I'm just going to put these on. For now, as I said, they're just in whatever position, but we need to put those in the right position for using 6 ROMs. So let's just pop that on there. Ready to be used on there. And then hopefully this will be robust enough. This is probably the difficult one because these pins are not perfectly aligned. Oops. Let's try it the normal way. Yeah, that worked quite well actually. There we go. It's on. So we have a jumper for this so we can open and close it as we wish. And we've got these 3 pin jumpers here, you know, the options, so we can actually choose how to configure this. And as I said, we'll come back later once we've had a look at the online guides as to which settings should be here. We'll set that correctly. And obviously we'll put the ROMs in and we should be ready to go. The next thing obviously we need to do is make those ROMs. So let's go over to my Windows PC. Okay, so we need to get ourselves 1.04 TOS written onto some EEPROMs. Now in this little mini guide, I'm not going to show you how to actually burn the actual EEPROMs. And the reason for that is I have a separate video, which I've actually clipped out of another video that I did on installing Jiffy DOS into a Commodore 64 disk drive. Now, Jiffy DOS is an EEPROM, or well, I should say it's a ROM-based acceleration method for that drive. So I had to burn the EEPROMs for that, and that became a bit of a mini series, and I did it a few times. So what I did was, for that particular series, I showed you how to use the software which was used with my XGECU T48 burner. That's a very common burner, very, very ubiquitous on the market. You can buy them very cheaply from AliExpress, and they work basically. So I would definitely recommend getting one of those. I think there is a slightly more modern version. You can get that, and I think it works with the software as well. I think the difference is it probably is faster. I think it burns the EEPROMs faster. That's not really a problem when they're quite small, like the ones that we're actually using with these retro machines. They're only, you know, 32K, 256K, whatever. So really the speed isn't that much of an issue, but you know, if it is for you, especially if you're going to burn a lot of EPROMs, then you could get the newer version. Now, I'm going to show you, as I said, a link to that, so you can actually watch that guide if you want to and see how you actually burn the EPROMs. What we're going to concentrate on here is how we split the 1.04 image into the 6 images that we need to then actually burn the 6 EPROMs. It's more complicated than it sounds. There was a little bit of searching around, and guys on the different forums were very kind to me. Atari Age, I think it was, and also on Exos. And they actually gave me a guide, which was invaluable, and I'm going to show you that in a second. But there's also this page as well, which I found very, very useful. It's extremely comprehensive in terms of its listing of TOS. So if I go down here, all the different TOS versions. And yeah, you can see why I was confused about all the different TOS versions that there are out for the Atari ST. It's absolutely crazy. I think most of these are the original ones from Atari, but there's also EMU TOS, which is a sort of aftermarket modern replacement for TOS. And I may actually try and install that on my machine in the future. But the only problem is I think it actually does require, well, actually this one here is 196K. So yeah, maybe I'll give this a go on my machine. What does it say down here? Does it say which machines it supports? No, it doesn't. So I'm not really sure this works with a Mega. So I'd obviously have to check that before going ahead. So I'm going to keep it vanilla here today. And we're going to go for the latest official Atari TOS that was available for my machine. So let's go back up to near the top. There is, yeah, so that's the one that's in my machine right now, TOS 1.02. And you can see here, yeah, it's available for the ST1040 ST Mega 2 and the Mega 4. And if you look down here, you can see there are lots of different versions of it. And I would go for English, you know, rather than German if I could, if it was in software, but it isn't, it's on ROM. So we have to download this version here. It's called Rainbow TOS. I think it's because if you look at the About information, when you're in color mode, it shows you the Atari logo with, I think, a little cycling color effect, which is basically a sort of homage to the 8-bit Atari machines. So what I need is the English version. Now, when I downloaded this TOS image a while back, I'm not quite sure if I went for the last one down here, assuming it would be the latest version. But in fact, it says here that it's actually a pre-release version. And it says it only works with the Atari, which is an emulator, or it works as a disk version. So that's definitely not a version I want to use. I want to use this version here, or the American version as an example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to download that, unzip it, put it in a folder, and then I'm going to show you the next stage where we then split that up into 6 image files. So this is the guide I was telling you about. So let's go to the top. It's actually, I think, associated with Exos, although it's on AtariWiki.com. This is invaluable. You can see how much depth it goes into about all the different ways that you can actually make your EPROMs. So big thanks to the person, I think it was on Exos, who gave me this link, because up until now I'd been stumbling around and it really wasn't very clear how and what you should do on each version of the machines. There are lots of different machines, lots of different options. So this made it a lot easier. So let's go down to the section where it shows you about the jumpers. Here we are. So this is the jumper selection that I need to use on my Mega 4 to use 6256K kilobit. So that's kilobit, not kilobyte. If you divide that by 8, it's 32 you get. So these are 6 32 kilobyte chips. I know it's confusing. So we need to have this jumper closed, W4. We need to have W2 closed on the left 2 pins, 1 and 2, and we need to have W3 the same as well. So we'll do that a little bit later. And then down here, there's a section where whoever wrote this actually goes into how you split up the files. So when you download the image file, unless it's been pre-split for you, sometimes on other websites you will actually find they've split the file. You need a piece of software to split it. So this piece of software, Cartman, I think is for actually cartridges, not necessarily, you know, specifically for splitting up TOS, but it does work with these images as well. So there is one gotcha with it, which I'll show you in a bit. It's a big gotcha, so you've got to be very careful. Actually, I'll show it here. It says here, Cartman is designed for little endian systems. So in other words, for those cartridge-based systems, I suppose. But our Atari and 68000s are big endian. And what that means is when it outputs the file which has been split into high and low, it'll be backwards. So you've got to make sure that you rename those files so that low becomes high, high becomes low. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So that's an important point. So let's actually swap over to Cartman. There we are, there's the piece of software. I'll just keep it on here. Now, there is actually a gotcha with this piece of software. It works pretty well, but there is a big bug. If you look at the split low and high, which will split a file into low and high parts of the ROM, and if you look at split ROMs, we need to use both of these to actually get to the 6 files. You'll see that the input file and output folder appear to be shared between them. They're not. So what happens is, if you actually select the file that you want to split into, say, 6 images here, say 32K each, you will find that if you select it here and you go here and then you click on OK, it won't work. It'll actually error and say there's a problem with the file reading it. And that really bamboozled me for quite a long time. I was like, well, that's really weird. You know, so basically, why did I do that? Well, you run the software and immediately it's on here. So you think, okay, well, that's the same dialogue as that. So you just go, okay, I'll select the file. And then I was going to here and I was saying, okay, 32K, do it, go, crash. So yeah, don't do that. When you want to split the ROMs, go to the tab first, then select the file, and then carry on and it'll work. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to split our file into low and high. So let's click on here. This is the folder. So in here, basically what I want to do is click on the image. Now by default, I should say, it will actually have bin files. So you won't be able to see it. But in fact, the bin and the image files are actually the same data format. So you can go like that and then just select the file. So let's do that. There we go. So it says it's going to read it in and it's going to output it into the same folder. So let's just go with that. Go. There's the progress. And what I'm going to do is, let me just show you the same folder again. There you go. So you see now that we have the high and the low files. But there is a problem. They need to be renamed. So I can do it in here, I think. So let's just go to rename. Where's rename? There we are. This needs to be low. So I'm just going to use a low for that. And this one is actually high. So let's change that. There we go. And we are ready to go. So let's cancel that. Now go to here. Now I'm going to select the high image first. We're going to split this into 3 parts. So each part is going to be 32K. And you can see there, actually, that's useful. It's telling you that for this, you need to use a 27C256 EEPROM. As I said, I'm not going to go into that in this video, but that's actually the EEPROMs that I used to burn this out. So that's actually pretty cool. So it tells you it's going to put it into the same folder. So we click on go, it should do it. There we are. And if we load the file again, there are the files. There we are, high, 0, 1, and 2. And it's actually really good to name them like this because that's actually the way they're named on the logic board. You can actually see it with the silk screen. So it's quite good to actually match that naming convention. So that's the high. So now let's select the low. There we are. Click on go. And OK. And again, if we have a look in there. So these 6 images here, the high 0, 1, and 2, and the low 0, 1, and 2, they're the files that we want to burn onto EEPROMs. So go and have a watch of my video where I show you how to use the burner if you don't know how to do that. If you do know how to do it, then you've got the images that you need now to burn those EEPROMs. So I went ahead and did that, and that gave me 6 EEPROMs, which then meant I could then populate the board. So let's get back to the machine, put those in, and see what happens. Okay, so we've got our sockets in here, and we've got our jumpers ready. Let me just zoom in on those, and I'll show you the state of play with those. So these are the 3 jumpers, as you can see, and currently they're in their original positions, which is these jumpers are set onto the right 2 pins, again onto the right 2 pins, and over here I've taken the jumper off for now, which means that this right now is not connected. So yeah, it's in its original position. In this position, it would expect there to be 2 ROMs. So obviously we're going to have to swap those jumpers over in a second to get that working. So yeah, let's get those fixed. This one needs to go here on these 2 pins. This one needs to go to the left onto these 2 pins. And I need to get a jumper here and place it on these 2 pins. So let's just do this from the side so I can see it a bit more easily. There you go. That's now closed. All good. Okay, so the next thing is we need to obviously put the ROMs in here. So let me just show you it from above so you can actually see which order they're in. So looking down onto the ROM sockets, you can see above them on the circuit board, it's got printed on the left bottom ROM low 0, and then above it low 1, and then the top socket there is low 2. And then on the right-hand side, you can see a high 0. It basically repeats, doesn't it? High 0, high 1, and high 2. So earlier we put the labels on the ROMs to match those, so we just need to put those in the same order, and we should be good. The only thing I'm worried about is this here. There should be a capacitor here. But there's this little fella here instead. So if it doesn't work, I might be in trouble because I might have to get a capacitor to actually replace this. But I'm assuming that it's correct because it was installed by Atari. So fingers crossed we won't have a problem with that. So yeah, fingers crossed this little fella here doesn't cause us any problems. I must admit, looking at the silk screen, it does say L52. And down here you've got an L53. So it's intentional. These are Cs, so these are capacitors. This is, what is it, a ferrite bead or something like that? I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up on the schematic, obviously, to find out what that is. But let's assume that Atari knew what they were doing, right? So let's put these ROMs in. I've got the machine set up, ready to go. I've got the power supply already installed over here. It's not screwed down or anything, and I haven't got the floppy drive installed or anything like that, but it's plugged into a monitor. Got my VGA adapter so I can actually plug it directly into a VGA monitor, so I'm good to actually see the image if it works. First, obviously, we need to put the ROMs in. This is going to be tricky because I've used round pinned sockets, and they are great because they do not tend to shed their chips. What I mean by that is if you have a heat cycle, the chips aren't going to work their ways out of the socket. But the downside is getting chips into those sockets can be really quite hard to do. So I'm probably going to fast forward on this because, yeah, you don't want to watch me struggling to get these in. And you've got to be very careful when you do this because it's very easy to think that you're actually pushing in the chip, but in fact, you're actually just bending one of the pins, and you don't want to do that. Yeah, that's not good. So let's try and get these in. I'm actually going to go from the top down because I'm assuming that the bottom socket will be easy because it's just a double wipe, whereas these will be more difficult. And, you know, I don't want to basically block my view. So yeah, let's go from LO2 downwards, making sure I've got the notch on this side. As you can see, the notches are all on the left. So let's try and get that in position. And immediately, just like I said, if I show you that to you there, I've got a bent pin there. So yeah, exactly what I was saying. Be very, very careful with these because they're just so easy to misalign and get these in. So yeah. So let me get this straightened out. I've got a pair of pliers here, and I'll basically try and flatten these out so I can get it back in again. There we go, as I anticipated, nightmare. So difficult to put them in. Okay, let's do height 2. Fingers crossed this will be a little bit easier. Yeah, that was fantastic, except that I've just noticed I put the label on backwards, so we've got to take that out again. Put the label on the right way around, and then put it back in again. Just check the other labels. Yeah, they're all good. Okay, so I've made a mistake with that label, so let's just fix that. Okay, let's put in high 2. Fingers crossed. No problems with this one. Feels okay on one side. Let's look on the other. Okay, that's 2. Okay, now low 1. Okay, low 1, high 1. Just checking the pins before I put it in, make sure it's okay. Yeah, it looks okay. Okay, and now for the last 2. Hopefully these will be a lot easier because they're just these double wipe sockets. Just giving it a visual inspection, just making sure I don't see any bent pins. Everything seemed to go in okay, good eventually, but... Okay, the moment of truth, we've got everything set up. Let's turn it on and see what happens. Jumpers in place, ROMs are in, off we go. Widescreen, that's good. Oh, bombs. 2 bombs, what does that mean? Oof, I don't know. I'm assuming the ROMs are going to be working, right? Because otherwise, why would we be getting a crash on boot because I'm assuming that the CPU is interacting with these, saying that there's something wrong, and then showing that. So let me just go and check what's going on. Maybe it's something simple like, I don't know, you need the floppy drive plugged in, which I doubt very much. It could be something else, but let's see. Maybe it's something simple, and then hopefully we can get this working. Maybe the keyboard needs to be plugged in. I don't know. So some time has passed. Well, actually quite a bit of time, and the astute amongst you will have noticed there is a change in the area of the jumpers, and that will explain basically the fix that I needed to do. So I had a bit of a panic. I thought, well, you know, maybe I didn't solder the sockets on correctly. Maybe there's a problem with the jumpers, and I checked all of that and everything was fine. I then thought, well, possibly the ROMs themselves are wrong. So I checked online and I thought that maybe I downloaded the wrong version. There's an English pre-release version of TOS 1.04, and I thought maybe I downloaded that one and I was using it, and it was, you know, there was incompatibility and it just crashed. And it turned out that I don't think that's actually the case, actually, although I haven't tested that. So I downloaded the US version of the 1.04, and the reason for that was I just wanted to make sure that, you know, if I had the English version and that was incompatible for some reason, there's no point in me just getting the same, potentially the same English version, and then burning that again and being in the same boat. So I thought, let's make an actual change, a definite change. So that's why I changed to US ROM. And I thought, well, you know, it's English at the end of the day. There's only small spelling changes probably, so that's fine. Having tested that, it didn't make any difference whatsoever. The machine still would just go to 2 bombs every time I booted. So I went back to reading some of the other guides, not the guide that I was following where I explained how to split the ROMs, which we used earlier, where I showed you how to burn these. That guide is very comprehensive, but it does seem to be missing a little and quite important piece of information if you're a Mega owner. I'm not sure if it's the same with others. And it says in that guide that there is a 74LS chip. It's actually 74LS11, I think it is. Or is it? Yeah, I think it's 11, 74LS11. And that chip needs to be here when you've got a 2-chip ROM machine. And as you know, when I started, my machine was a 2-ROM machine, and I had that chip there. Some guides, not the one that I showed you earlier, but other guides, I've seen people saying it doesn't need that chip when you have 6 ROMs. Some people saying it doesn't make any difference as long as you set the jumpers correctly and you have the 6 ROMs set up correctly, it should work fine. And there does seem to be some confusion about that. So I checked that guide again, and I looked for the chip in the description, and it does say that if you're going from 6 to 2, you do need that chip, and you would need to solder it into the board to get 2 chips to work. What it doesn't say is that you need to do the opposite when you're using 6 ROMs. And my theory is that that guide is actually pretty thorough, but that it's missed a little edge case, which is that if it's a certain revision of Mega board, maybe, you know, mine's a revision B, then there's something specific about this particular revision, which means that if you leave that chip in place, even if you have the jumper set and everything else is correct, it won't work. And that was basically the idea that I went with. So spent quite a lot of time getting this chip desoldered. In fact, it was the first chip I've ever actually desoldered, so that was fun. Wasn't that easy to get it out. I did mangle the chip a bit, but in the end, this is the actual chip. And you'll see that on one side it's actually in pretty good condition, but on the other side I've lost a little bit of the leg on this one when I was removing it. It actually snapped off because of metal fatigue, you know, when you're trying to get it out. So I was a little bit worried about that. This chip is actually pretty easy to replace. It's pretty, you know, these are still being made as far as I know. You can get at least, you know, new old stock anyway. So it wasn't a big issue if that chip was broken, but I did then spend some time cleaning it and straightening the legs and getting it back into good condition. And I also went back to putting the 2 ROMs back in, you know, these ROMs. I put these back in, and then I put this chip in to test that my mod hadn't broken the original configuration, and it was working. So that was good. I'd removed the chip, put a socket in, hadn't broken the machine. Fantastic. So then I took the chip out, put the jumpers back to this setup, which is for 6 ROMs, put the American ROMs in, the US ROMs, and then turned on the machine. And let's see what happens when I do that. Okay, so hopefully you can see the screen. It's not going to show any signal right now, it's not turned on. And I'm going to make sure that my monitor's set up for HDMI. And I'm going to turn the machine on. And there it goes. You can, I don't know if you can hear the floppy drive going. but it is actually working. Okay, let's see what happens. White screen, which is a good sign, and it hasn't crashed yet. When the floppy drive is installed, and I think it does actually need it actually, it does take quite a while to check the floppy drive before it goes into TOS. It's just basically waiting to see if it can actually boot off a disk. So let's just wait and see what happens. It takes quite a while actually before it carries on. And there we go. There we are. So you can see it's working. Now, I don't have the keyboard plugged in at the moment, and that's because it's quite big and it's difficult to fit on the desk here. How do I know that? Because it's fallen off, and I don't want that to happen again. So right now, I don't have it plugged in. It actually goes into a jack over here on the side of the machine. We're not finished yet. We're going to do the fan, remember? So the machine now works. We do have the US TOS installed, and I think that's fine. I don't think I'm going to take these off again and reburn these ROMs. So what we'll do is next is we'll move on and we'll get that fan replaced because it's a little bit noisy. It's not too bad, but I can definitely hear a sort of semi-high-pitched whine. I would like it if that was actually got rid of. So let's move on and upgrade the fan. Okay, so I've taken the power supply out of the chassis. This was easy to get out. Got it plugged in. I've got my other microphone here, and we're just going to take a recording of the sound so you get an idea of how noisy it is right now. It's not terrible, but yeah, anyway, see what you think. There we are. So that's it right now. So we're going to replace this with a Noctua. So let's turn it off, and I'll turn off this microphone. We'll record it again later. There we go. Okay, so the plan. I've been thinking about this, and this is the Noctua fan. It's a lot thinner than this one, as you can see. I'm not sure if that's going to cause me any problems. This has got some very large bolts here with nuts on the end. There's only actually 3. This one here is there, but in the corner there's no room to actually put a 4th one, so they've not put one in. Obviously 3 bolts is more than enough. In fact, it probably could have been fine with just 1 here and 1 here, I would imagine. But this is much thinner. At the other end of the story, we've got this connector. One of the watchers of the channel, one of the friends of the channel, Vinny, actually not a friend of the ST, but anyway, that's a long story. But he suggested, rather than cutting off these, which is normally what I do, and then just solder them on to the existing wires, to actually keep this connector. So I'm going to follow that advice, and I've got a header here, a 3-pin header. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 2 wires that I have here, positive and negative, and I'm going to solder them onto here. And then we can just plug it in, which is nice, easier to remove. Now, to do that, obviously, I want to unplug it. I don't want it to be live when I'm working on it. There we go. Out it comes. And on the underside of here, you'll see there's the cable going from the fan all the way over to there. So I'm just going to cut it off probably about here and then strip the wire. And like I said, solder onto here. It's not going to be amazing looking, but it is probably better than just unsoldering this from the board. So let's just clip it here. There we are. Next, let's take this out. There we go, that's all 3 removed. I'm taking care to keep the washers. There's 2 washers on each one. Let's get this on. There we are, we'll put it over here in a little spare parts area. And hopefully this will now just lift out, taking the cable with it. There we go. It says it's actually made by Atari. Interesting. I wonder if they actually had their own fan manufacturer, or if it's just relabeled. What does it say here? Say-ho Electronic. Well, weird. They've got their little badge on there. Maybe they asked them to have that added. I'm not sure. Okay, so basically we want this to obviously vent outwards. We want this to go underneath here. But the first thing we need to do is put this jumper on. Now, it's actually on this particular connector here, probably quite hard to see, but you've got a yellow wire. That's the tachometer to tell you what the speed is that it's running at. Red is the same as on here, as far as I understand it, and black is the same here as well. Well, the red and black stripe wire. So if I connect those up, it should be like for like. And if it isn't, the nice thing is I can actually swap this around if I take the actual 3rd pin off. I'm going to keep the 3rd pin for now, just for extra strength. But if it proves to be a problem, like I said, I can take it off and then I can actually put it in either way around easily. Okay, so let's get the soldering iron ready, and then let's get this ready to solder. It's going to be quite difficult to solder this, so I might get my little octopus arm thingy, this thing, which isn't particularly great, but sometimes it can be useful. So let's get it set up. There we go, that's not bad. And the tricky part of this, obviously, is that we have this, which is quite small. So I'm going to have to strip these wires first. So let me get these stripped. Hopefully they will work with my wire stripper, because in the last video I actually couldn't use it because the wires were too small. These actually look pretty small, actually. Not sure I can use the wire stripper. There we go. Okay, there we are. And I've twisted those. Now I need to tin them up. So let's get the soldering iron on. Okay, let's get a little bit of solder on here, and then I'm going to present it onto these wires, and hopefully the flux in it will help it to go on. That's great. Now this one. Okay, let's just clean that off, the excess. Okay, let's see if I can get this presented now so that the wires present themselves relatively cleanly to the header. Okay, so that needs to go there and that needs to go there. Let's have a look on this connector. What's on the outside? Black. So ideally we need black there and then red. Red is center, yeah, red center. Okay, let's try that. Just put a tiny bit of flux. There we go. Oops, put it on and it came off again. There we are. Okay, let's get the wire, try and present it into a position where we can get it in there. And I think what I might do is actually try and get a big blob on the pin and then melt it again. Okay, they've both got nice big blobs of solder. So what I want to try and do now is marry up these wires and get them to melt into those blobs. So let's get it a bit closer. Black on the outside, like I said. Now for the middle one. More difficult because now I haven't got any give on the distance. Oops, should have held on. It's getting quite hot actually, that's why I left go. There we are. Hold it, hold it, hold it. Ow, 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 ow. That looks good. Okay, let's turn this off. So let's first of all test the fan, and we'll just plug it in, making sure to get this the right way around. So basically black is on the outside, which is that one. So I'm going to plug that in like that. There we go. Now what we're looking for is when this turns on, we obviously want the airflow to be going outwards towards the logo. So if I haven't got this right, if the polarity is wrong, then I'll have to swap it around. But hopefully it's correct. I mean, it's black for black, red for red. So it should be blowing in this direction towards the camera. And yeah, well, anyway, less talking, let's try it. Yes, it is. Yep, it is. So I'm going to turn that off. Anyway, I hope you can see that. It is actually working. And I really can't hear anything. That's very, very good. Excellent. That's a big difference. So let me try and get this to sit up. What you might actually hear here more than anything is actually the noise of the wind on the microphone. That's the best I can do in terms of testing. So let's turn that on. Put that like that. Turn it on. And now you can hear what this fan makes, the noise it makes. It's not high-pitched at all. Like I said, I really can't hear it. It's absolutely silent. That's great. The reason why I'm happy is because I recently did another fan replacement with, I think it was a 60mm fan for my friend Lee's Amiga 3000, and the difference wasn't that massive really between the old fan and the new one. I think that was a Panaflow, but in this case, it's really, really night and day. It's completely silent really, so that's fantastic. And I think what we want to do now is just get it back into position. And there was some tape originally holding this down, so I think I will go and get some tape, and we'll tape this back in position on the underside so it isn't flopping about. But first, obviously I need to put it back in, and let's see which way round I'm going to do it. I think let's unplug this. I think it needs to go underneath here and then through. Can I get it through here? No, I can't, so I'm going to have to unplug it. There we are. get it through here. You see, I told you that getting the jack on there would be good, coming useful. There we are, that's working. Now the holes line up, which is good. So let's get that in position and put the washers on once we've got this done. So yeah, let's get these bolts back on and secure it in place. Obviously, these are going to be way too long, but luckily, because it's a bolt, you can adjust it, which is fantastic. So yeah, let's do that. There we go. Okay, let's get this wire connected back up. Black is there on the outside, so let's just connect it up. And let me get some tape, and I think I'm just going to tape that like that and just keep it nice and neat out of the way. Okay, I've got some tape. So it's quite thick sort of duct tape material, so let's just put that like that. And yeah, that should be pretty neat, I think. Just put that across there. Well, looks pretty good, doesn't it? I think. Right, let's test it before we actually put it back together. Obviously being careful not to give myself a shock. Very easy to do it with this, I think. So, and turn it on. There we are. Hopefully you can see that then. The fan is actually spinning. And like I said, it's basically silent. So fantastic, we're ready to put this back together. So let's do that, and let's turn on the machine and give it a quick test. Well, that worked out okay, didn't it? I mean, the machine's still working and we now have an English language ROM in the machine. It's interesting because, you know, I don't have much experience with the ST, so I'm having to learn as I go along. And the ROM upgrade is actually a bit pernickety in this particular machine. You know, it's just a pity that you can't get 96K EPROMs anymore, because that would just make life so much easier. You know, just burn the EPROMs, plop them in, 2 of them, and off you go. It'd be fantastic. But unfortunately, it appears that 96K EPROMs, at least in the 28-pin DIP variety, have gone. You know, you just can't get those anymore. So that's a real pity. And I found it interesting that, you know, you were seeing those guides out there, various people saying, yeah, you need to do this for the jumpers, you need to put these sockets in and then it works. And then other people say, no, it doesn't work, you have to remove the 74LS11. And there was a disagreement. Nobody ever really seemed to work out why that was. And I'm pretty certain that it's something to do with the revisions of the different boards in this. I've seen, I think, about 8 at least. The revision numbers on this are quite strange. I think it's like revision 1, revision B, then it goes back to numbers, and I've seen like revision 6, 7, 8. So there were quite a lot of revisions of this machine. And I've got a feeling that there are at least a couple of versions, well, we know mine anyway, where it definitely does need to have the 74LS chip removed. Otherwise, it will not work. And it's nothing to do with the jumpers. You can set the jumpers correctly. It just won't work. So I've seen somebody out there say that what they did was actually they snipped one of the pins on that chip, which removes the power supply to it, I guess. That stops that chip working, which means then the machine boots. It's as if effectively the chip isn't there. I decided not to go that way. I thought it would be better to remove the chip, put in a socket, so then it's easy enough to actually take the chip out, put it back in. Yeah, that did prove out to be a little bit of a pain, but I got it done in the end. So what I've done is to test this out, I've got Moon Mist, which is one of my Infocom games. And my Infocom games are, you know, they're sort of randomly bought over the last few years. And you find that you get one, which will be for the Commodore 64, then for the Tandy, TRS-80, Apple II, you know, all the different machines of the era, which means that I actually have quite a few ST Infocom games, and this is one of them, Moon Mist, and this does work. The disc actually still works in this, which is great. So I'm going to use this to test the machine because I don't really have any other floppy games that I can test. And in fact, it's only because of my Infocom library, which has proved actually to be a really good resource because I pretty much have an Infocom game for any of the old retro machines, you know, Atari 8-bit computers, you name it. I pretty much have a game that will actually run on it. Unfortunately, some of the discs are a little bit old and they don't always work. So yeah, that can be a bit hit and miss. Anyway, this works. So I put it in, as you can see. And I actually, this is interesting. I found this monitor the other day on a bin when I was shopping. I went to a supermarket and outside there was like a dustbin. And sitting on top of it was this monitor. No power supply. So I'm assuming somebody threw it away. And I took a punt on it and I actually bought a replacement power supply from eBay. It turns out that all of these machines of the same era seem to have the same power supply. It's a 19-volt power supply. So I bought that. Fingers crossed it would actually work. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see the LG logo there. It does actually work. And it's completely functional. It's fantastic. Need to give it a little bit of a clean. It's a little bit knocked up, but it does actually work. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start the machine off in low-res mode. And to do that, there's a little switch on the VGA adapter on the back of it. You can either switch that to monochrome mode, which then forces the machine into high-res, or you can leave it in the standard mode, which then allows you to have low-res or medium-res. I'm just going to leave it in low-res for a second, just so I can show you the about screen for the TOS. So I'm just going to turn on the machine. There you go. As you can see, it's working. Very quiet now that I've replaced the fan. And that's how quickly it boots. Actually, if you take the floppy disk out and leave it to boot, it takes ages. It seems to take like, oh, I don't know, 30, 40 seconds. It takes a very long time. But as long as you've got a floppy disk in there, it will actually boot up really quickly. It's loading up off ROM, so yeah, it's pretty much instantaneous. And if I go to desktop info, there you go. So that's why this is called Rainbow TOS. As you can see, it's got this color cycling Atari logo, which, as I said earlier in the video, is a bit of a homage to the old 8-bit Atari machines, which had this ability to color cycle, which was used a lot back in the day. There were lots of games which used this effect. Very attractive as well, too. Who doesn't like a rainbow? So there you are. You can see the machine works. So interestingly, even though the disk is in there, it doesn't auto-boot up the Infocom game. I think it's a PRG file, program file. I assumed that if there was a program file on a floppy disk, it would just automatically boot. There must be some other criteria as to what makes a disk bootable. I'm not sure what that is. Atari aficionados might be able to tell me what there is. But if I go to the floppy disk, you'll see that it actually has the program file, like I said, Moon Mist. And if I double click on that, it will actually load the game. So yeah, I'm really happy that the machine works, and you know, it's interesting that I'll now actually be able to play Infocom games for the first time on a different platform, which I never used back in the day, an Atari ST. So in a second it'll load up, and it actually loads up in low-res mode, so you can see it actually fills pretty much the entire screen with text, which is nice and readable. I mean, I'm getting old, my eyes aren't as good as they used to be, and talking about getting old, I've got a story for you in a second, which will make you laugh or cry. I'm not sure which of the two. Now then, if we wanted to see this in high-res mode, so you can see more text, I would need to change the adapter on the back. So I'm just going to reach behind and switch it over into high-res mode, boot it up. And there we go. And instantly you're back into the desktop again. Very, very quick boot. And if we load up the floppy disk again, I think it's this one. There we go. And Moonmist, let's load that up. I actually quite like the machine in high-res mode. I mean, it would be nice to have color in this resolution, but this was, intended for monochrome monitors back in the day, high-resolution monochrome monitors, and that was a very standard monitor that many people bought it to STs with to do work on, rather than, playing games and things like that. So there we are. There's Moonmist in high-res mode. I actually prefer it in this resolution. This is basically the resolution I would play the game in if I was to do so. I like the text. It's actually nice and readable. I've tried playing Infocom games more recently on a Commodore 64 on a 1084 monitor, and I find that quite hard to read the text on that, but on here it's actually very clear. So yeah, fantastic. The machine, I think, is ready to use. This keyboard does need a bit of a clean, so I am going to disassemble this and give this a clean off camera. It's not particularly yellowed. It's a bit yellowed, but not too bad. But what I'm planning to do is next week in the UK, there is a weather forecast which may change, but it basically shows clear blue skies every day for a week. So what I might do is actually put these both outside in the sun and just sun bleach them, because I don't really want to bother with retrobrighting them right now. But I've seen it being done, and I've actually done it myself, that you can actually bleach plastic just by using the sun. And I think that might be enough. I mean, I don't want to have a huge amount of bleaching. This machine in particular looks pretty good. This looks a little bit more yellowed. So yeah, I think a clean for this has already been cleaned. And then I think I'll just let it retro bright in the sun and get it back to looking a little bit closer to pure gray, rather than having that sort of slightly yellow cast to it. That's it, I think, for now. I think we're basically happy that this machine works. It's in English, and I can now move on to actually using it. I think what I'm going to look at for the future of this particular machine, and another video in this series, is that I want to get a hard disk into it. Right now, I only have a floppy drive. I don't have any games on floppy apart from Infocom games. So that's going to make it very difficult to actually, test out the machine and try the software that you could get back in the day. So I'm looking into getting a hard disk, and there are a few different options. I've heard of the Ultra Satan device. I would really like to put a blue SCSI in this. That's because I'm more familiar with it, and it's just easier for me to work with it, not have to learn a new device. But the problem with the ST is that it used a SCSI variant called a SCSI, I think it is, a Atari small computer interface, I think it is, and that is not SCSI compatible. However, you can get adapters that can plug into it that then makes it compatible with SCSI. So I could get one of those adapters, get a blue SCSI, plug it in together, and then I would have a hard drive. Not sure if I could do it inside the machine. Not sure if there's enough space in there. It's not incredibly tall, but that might be a possibility. I'll look into that. And I would really love to hear people's comments on what they think about doing that. Another technique that I can use is you can get an enclosure, which is basically almost an exact copy of this case, that would sit underneath it, I think. I've seen some people putting on top, underneath, whatever. But then basically you use an ASCSI cable to plug that device into this, and it's a hard drive enclosure. They actually cost a lot of money back in the day. They are, as I said, ASCSI based, so I would have to use an adapter inside that. But I quite like the idea of that. I think it would be quite cool to have the full tower of power. And because it's a large case like this, I wouldn't have any issues about fitting the SCSI card in there or anything like that. So I think that's my plan right now. Although it's a lot more expensive because you have to obviously buy that particular device as well. So maybe one for the future, or if anybody out there has one they want to donate to the channel, that would be great. Not that I'm expecting anybody to do that, but that would be wonderful. Otherwise, I'll just have to start saving up and eventually get one of those and then do the adaptation, and we'll film that and we'll make a video out of it. So before we finish off, let me tell you my story about senior moment. I was actually working here earlier this week on this chair, and this chair was actually given to me by a friend, and it's actually perfectly good, but the problem is it has casters, or it had casters that were not very wheelie. They didn't turn very well, and it was actually scratching my new wooden floor in here. So I decided I needed to replace that. So I sent off for 5 casters from AliExpress, and about a week later they turned up, and I put them on here onto the chair, and they were actually fantastic. They work really well, except they are very, very wheelie. They've got rubber wheels and really nice ball bearings, but the problem with that is it makes the chair very, very mobile. I'm working on the machine, I'm adjusting it on the desk, and I go to sit down on the chair, and I can just about get my bum onto the chair, but then it kind of pushed away from me, and instead of actually sitting on the chair, I fell on the floor, which isn't such a bad thing, except that somehow as I did that, it managed to propel me around in this direction. So instead of actually falling backwards like this, I actually fell this way, and then I managed to hit my head on the edge of the desk. And the desk is made out of solid oak, and it's about 4 centimeters thick. So yeah, that wasn't much fun. I kind of fell on the floor. I didn't lose consciousness, but I was definitely dazed. And after a few seconds, I kind of collected myself and got back up. And the first thing I felt was I was really embarrassed that I'd kind of done that. I thought, how did I manage to fall off my own chair? But then after a few seconds, I managed to get my wits together and pick myself up and put things away. And I told my wife about it. And when I went to bed that night, I actually had quite a bad headache. So I think I gave myself minor concussion. But I talked to a medic, and they reassured me that it sounded like, as I just said, minor concussion, something to be aware of, keep an eye on. But since then, I seem to have mended, and I seem to be okay. Like a day later, if I opened my mouth wide, it hurt in my ears. So definitely there was some kind of severe crack to the top of my head. But anyway, I've survived, and I'm still here, and I'm still making videos. So I've got to be very careful with this chair. It's the devil's chair. It's obviously out to kill me. So I'll have to keep an eye on it and make sure that every time I sit down on it, I make sure that it's definitely underneath me, you know, in the right position. Anyway, I won't waffle on any further. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed the series so far. Looking forward to hopefully reconvening in the near future, as I said, with the hard drive enclosure. It would be great to get one of those and then put a blue SCSI in it. And it'd be quite nice to get one of those adapters and make the adaptation, maybe get a bracket made, although I don't have a 3D printer yet. I'm looking to try and get a 3D printer for the channel. I was hoping to get sponsorship to get one, but doesn't look like that's working out because basically I don't have enough subscribers. So talking about subscribers, it would be really great that if you haven't subscribed so far, then please click on subscribe. And also, if you did enjoy this video, then click on the like button as well, because it would be great if you could do that to give this video a hand up with the algorithm. Definitely please subscribe, like I said, and yeah, then hopefully we'll see you back in the future, because you will also have hit the notify button as well. That makes sure that you actually get notifications every time I release a video, so you know about them. So yeah, please do that as well. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the video, and I'll hopefully see you back soon. But until then, have a good day. Take care.